What's up, guys? I'm Chad Barnes, and welcome to the channel. Here, it's all about real car talk, from simple fixes to smart driving tips and keeping your ride in top shape. If that sounds good to you, go ahead and give the video a thumbs up. Hit that subscribe button, and make sure you watch all the way through. There's a lot of good stuff coming. Let's get to it.
The 2000s were good times for automakers, so many decided to experiment. For Opel, one of them was Signum. In 2002, the Germans released the third generation of the Vectra model, which had quite an exhaustive body range: sedan, station wagon, and hatchback, or rather, liftback or hatchback. But the company had a fresh idea: to create a spacious car with an emphasis on rear passengers, thus bringing it closer to the business class, but making it not a sedan, but a hatchback. The recipe was simple. The basis was the Vectra station wagon with increased wheelbase by 13 centimeters compared to the sedan, but reduced the rear overhang, creating a complete image of a large classic hatchback. As a result, Signum turned out to be only 4 centimeters longer than the usual hatch Vectra. Inside, in addition to the increased legroom, there was a rear row with 2 separate seats with the possibility of longitudinal adjustment and backrest tilt, which increased the comfort of rear passengers. Formerly, there was a bridge between them, allowing to seat 3 people in the back, but usually it was blocked by an armrest. Moreover, there was an optional refrigerator box for the rear row. It did not have its own cooling, but allowed to keep something cold in it. Otherwise, the car was a complete copy of the regular Vectra, built on the then new Epsilon platform, which later received the Opel insignia Chevrolet Malibu. The Signum was positioned higher and was more expensive than the Vectra, except that the basic 1.6-liter gasoline engines were abandoned, which was logical. Sales started in spring 2003, and by summer the model reached Russia. Russian prices started from 900,000 rubles and reached 1.2 million without options, and with them could exceed 1.3 million. But sales are not successful neither in Russia nor in Europe. However, taking into account the minimal costs of production of the model, which was produced on the same conveyor with Vectra, it survived synchronous with the Source restyling in 2005 and left the assembly line with him in 2008. The experiment was rather unsuccessful. The public quite rightly decided that if the car looks like Vectra, drives like Vectra, and feels like Vectra, then it should cost like Vectra. However, now on the secondary market things are the same. For Signum they ask no more than for its relative. However, the cars are much less. At the moment of writing the material there were more than 300 Vectra C for sale on Avito, but Signum, only 5. Is it worth chasing the exclusive, and what to pay attention to when buying? When it comes to the bodywork, there's good news and bad news. The good news is that galvanization and painting allow these cars to resist aging, contrary to stereotypes about Opels. The bad is that the age of most cars is already approaching 20 years, so here the owner's care and his financial condition come to the forefront. Signum, despite its rarity, has not become a car for collectors and connoisseurs. Usually it is just considered for purchase along with the usual Vectra. Accordingly, and the variation in the condition of the cars is just as large. Most of the bodywork problems are quite typical for a car of this age. For example, the sill behind the front wheels is covered with a plastic cover, but it is still exposed to water and dirt, slowly peeling and rusting, especially in the absence of a massive standard mudguard. The lower part in the seam area is also damaged by abrasion and jacks and gives up under the onslaught of moisture. An additional specialty feature of the sills is the presence of a door gasket along the entire length above the plastic sill cover. Accordingly, moisture and dirt accumulate under the seal, gradually leading to corrosion in this area, especially in the seal mounting holes. At the same time, you can inspect the lower edges of the doors, which sometimes also lose their positions. Rear arches also get chipped and slowly begin to rust, and if the problem is not solved in time, then rot, and both outside and inside. In the cavity of the arch, the front edge of a non-galvanized roof panel rusts quite quickly when chipped, and sometimes corrosion starts in the niche between the roof and the windshield after its poor quality replacement. Chips at the joints of bumpers with wings are possible, as well as corrosion from under the molding on the trunk lid in sedans. But the hood here is aluminum, so the chips do not rust, which allows you to paint over the defects. And the non-original steel hood hints at the restoration of the car after an accident. As it is easy to guess, there are enough non-original body parts for Signum because practically everything, except for the rear part, fits here from ordinary Vectra. However, there are still difficulties. For example, the front bumper for some reason actually has no replacements and the original costs prohibitive money, 50 to 70,000. And more, so it is easier to buy it at the dismantling for 7 to 15,000. But the front fender can be found new for the 3rd of May, 10,000 instead of 40,000 for the original. Steel hood is available for 10 to 15,000 for pre-restyling and 20 to 25,000 for restyling, which is clearly favorable against the background of 6-figure price tags of the original. The windshield can also be bought for 8 to 10,000, although the branded one is asked for 100,000. A non-original halogen headlight on the door styling costs 6 to 12,000 instead of 20 to 30,000 for the original, and xenon can be found for 12 to 20,000 instead of 50,000. Difficulties begin when you hit from behind. If the rear lamp can be bought non-original for 10 to 20,000, the rear bumper is again the original for 80 to 100,000, but only to get it at the nearest dismantling 10 times cheaper will not work. And where to get the trunk lid and how much it will cost, and it is an open question, with it even on foreign scrapyards we'll have to dig. The Signum has independent suspensions, the usual McPherson in front, and multi-lever at the rear. Here, too, do not pay attention to the price tags of original spare parts, they are often completely abstract. For example, the front L-shaped lever with GM marking can cost 50,000 rubles, but non-original can be bought in assortment for 3 to 12,000. The ball bearing here, by the way, is standard non-removable. Separately it is possible to buy only a rear silent block. The front hub unit in a branded box is also estimated at more than 50,000 and substitutes are available for 4 to 10,000. With the rear hub, however, about the same situation, except that the original is found for 20,000. The standard shock absorber is unexpectedly cheap, only 15,000, but analogs still start from 2, and a quality shock absorber can be bought for 4 to 5. Stabilizer struts, of course, are inexpensive, from 500 rubles. The rear multi-lever is repairable, transverse links can be found non-original for 3 to 6,000 and for expensive longitudinal, as in fact, for all others to buy separate silent blocks. The Signum's brakes are all-round disc brakes with conventional single-piston mechanisms with floating bracket. Diameter of front discs is usually 285 or 302 mm and rear and ventilated 278 mm, although the cars with V6 were equipped with large brakes with ventilated discs for 345 mm in front and 292 mm in the rear. However, consumables even for big brakes cost quite usual money. The front disc can be bought for 4 to 8,000 and the rear one from 1.5. More modest discs are a little cheaper, but there is nothing to fear globally. But there is one thin place in steering, it is a pump. The matter is that the amplifier here is electro-hydraulic, and the electric pump turns out to be the most expensive node. The original one is prohibitively expensive, more than 100,000 rubles, but a restored or non-original one can be bought for 20 to 25,000. It is, of course, cheap against the background of the firm, but in general it is still a lot, so the work of the pump and oil cleanliness should be paid close attention to when inspecting the machine. Well, a reconditioned rail has about the same cost as the pump. In spite of business ambitions, Signum was not left without manual gearboxes, they are as widespread here as on ordinary Vectra. And if to speak about number of variants, they are more than automatic ones. Look yourself, as the power of motors grows, they were combined with them 5-speed automatic transmission with indices F17, F23, and F35, and then 6-speed M32 and F40. And, strange as it may seem, not all of them can be called eternal, as many people are used to CMKP. For example, the basic F17 of own development of Opel is frankly weak even for 1.8-litre motor with which it is combined. There are widespread problems with bearings and backlash of the primary shaft as well as differential. F23 and F35 boxes are already much better. Here it is necessary only to follow the oil level and change it at least once in 50 to 60,000 kilometers. But the unit M32 from GetRag may have problems with bearings and differential, so it also needs to be listened and probed on the move. 6-speed F40 is also strong and quite reliable, which is not surprising, considering that it was intended for the most powerful motors. In general, when buying Signum with manual, it is better to specify in advance which box is combined with a particular motor, in order to be better prepared for checking. In general, the same applies to choosing a car with an automatic. The thing is that there were several variants of automatic transmission here too. The basic variant was Easytronic Robot, combined with a motor 1.8. It will not please neither work, nor reliability. It does not know how to start in a hill, switches slowly and often jerkily. Resource of mechanical part is not bad, but by trifles like problems with electrics and control electronics can often bother. The only advantage is repairability and low cost of repair, and that is on condition of knowledgeable specialists. 5-speed hydro-mechanical boxes from Aisin, AW55-50 and AW55-51 worked with older motors. They can be considered a really good choice. They are quite reliable and require only regular oil changes every 40 to 50,000 kilometers. And attention to temperature. Overheating and dirty oil can reduce their resource up to 150,000 kilometers, but in general they are able to pass 200 to 250 before reassembly, especially if you don't skimp on an additional external oil cooling radiator. And a senior 6-speed TF80SC is even stronger. Despite of more complex and modern design, it has a high potential resource because it confidently holds torque of V6 motors. However, it is more demanding to service, the operating temperature is higher, and sensitivity to dirty oil is stronger, so it should be changed not less than 50,000 kilometers and better every 30 to 40. Well, an installation of an external radiator to reduce the operating temperature. It is also so. Choosing the best gearbox when buying a Signum is the first task. And the second is a choice of motor. First of all, there are a lot of motors here, more than 10, and secondly, not all of them can be considered successful. In general, the motor range here is the same as in Vectra, except for basic 1.6 liter. But even without them it is possible to understand for a long time. A detailed story about all possible engines we made in our recent technical piece about buying a used Vectra C, so here's a brief summary. The range of gasoline engines is opened by 1.8-liter engines, the oldest of which is Z18XE, so old that the block is cast iron. The design is also the simplest: belt drive timing, distributed injection, hydrocompensators and complete absence of phase regulators. Potential resource of the motor is not bad, more than 300,000 kilometers, but oil consumption due to piston ring Zakixarovka appears much earlier, and the cylinder head can upset with wear of valve guides, which is solved only by their replacement. After restyling it was replaced by Z18XER. Here there are already phase shifters on the inlet and outlet, but there are no hydrocompensators. And the design is improved. There is still a tendency to stick piston rings, especially taking into account the increased operating temperature, but the life of the motor can be significantly prolonged due to a cooler thermostat and good maintenance. The next variants by volume are 2.2-liter atmospheric engine Z22YH, as well as supercharged Z20 net, which belong to the same family. Here is already an aluminum block with cast iron liners and chain timing, the cost of replacing which is much higher than belted on older motors. Here, too, it is worth paying attention to oil consumption, and the atmospheric engine in addition is equipped with direct injection, which means a higher cost of fuel equipment. 2-liter motor compensates for the simplicity of injection by the presence of supercharging, which increases the complexity and cost of maintenance, although in general these options can be considered not bad. Well, at the top of the range there are V6 engines. Before restyling it is 3.2-liter atmospheric Z32 SE with a cast iron block, relatively simple and reliable, but still more expensive in maintenance and repair than inline 4. And the most powerful variants are 2.8-liter turbocharged V6 with indices Z28 NEL and Z28 net. They, however, are the most complicated and unreasonably expensive in maintenance. There is an aluminum block, 3 chains in the drive of timing and oil pump, as well as the turbocharger itself. And all this at the age of 13 to 15 years can require a lot of money for repairs. Diesel engines are mainly 4-cylinder Y20DTH and Y22DTR for 2 and 2.2 liters of Opel's own development, as well as 1.9-liter Z19DT, Z19DTH and Z19DTL jointly developed with Fiat. The first ones are generally not bad: cast iron blocks, reliable chain timing. These engines can go more than 250,000 kilometers on good fuel and oil. But low-quality fuel can sharply undermine the budget due to the breakdown of the fuel injector, the cost of which in the assembly is six-figure. Of course, there is a possibility of repair, but it will still need to find good specialists. Italian motors for 1.9 liters are even better, reliability is comparable, and sensitivity to the quality of oil and fuel is lower. Although they should not be considered immortal. Well, and taking into account that they are combined with hydromechanical automatic, they can be considered one of the most logical variants at purchase of Signum. At the top of the diesel range were 3-liter V6 of Isuzu development, Y30DT and Z30DT. It is extremely difficult to meet them, and it is hardly worth chasing them. In addition to the typical problems with fuel equipment and variable geometry turbine, they were also noted by the probability of overheating with the breakdown of the cylinder head gasket and cracking of the head. The problem does not have mass character, but it is worth to remember about it in the context of diagnostics. However, all these detailed arguments about motors in practice are broken in practice by extremely scarce choice of cars. For example, at the moment of writing the material there was not a single car with V6 on sale, only gasoline 4s for 1.8. 2 and 2.2 liters, as well as a couple of cars with 2.2-liter diesel. However, even from this list you can choose something. For example, diesel motors were combined with hydromechanical automatics, so if you expect to buy Signum with automatic, you can consider such variants. Well, and if the old diesel scares you, as well as the cost of automatic transmission repair, you can look for a gasoline car on mechanics. For example, if Autoteca will confirm such a low mileage and accident-free history, and diagnostics, good technical condition, then Signum can become an interesting variant of the car, not like everyone else, but with the cost of ownership like everyone else. This, perhaps, is its main value today. In conclusion, the Opel Signum can be an intriguing option for those considering a hatchback for business use, especially at a price point of 500,000 rubles. Its unique design, spacious interior, and comfortable ride make it a practical choice for various business needs. However, potential buyers should weigh the vehicle's reliability, maintenance costs, and availability of parts against their specific requirements. Ultimately, if you prioritize comfort and versatility in your business vehicle, the Opel Signum could be a worthwhile investment. Thank you for watching, and we hope this analysis helps you make an informed decision.